Welcome to all you storm watchers, storm chasers, and Leanierologists out there. Welcome to another edition of Tempest Talks, where we discuss lean philosophy, principles, and tools, and how they impact our personal and professional lives. Today, we will be discussing teaching lean with my good friend, Dr. Miles. By way of introduction, Dr. Miles, or Mike, as
Mike,
his friends call him, holds several degrees in metallurgical engineering, from a BS in metallurgical engineering from the University of Idaho, an MS in metallurgical engineering from Ohio State University, and a PhD in materials science and engineering from a university in Paris, the School of Mines or Mining, as I understand it. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, it's Paris School of Mines. It's engineering school in France. Yep.
Fantastic. After finishing school, he worked for Pichinet, a French company that specializes in aluminum and aluminum products and makes about $12 billion per year in revenue. In 1995, he started working at an R&D center in France as well for about 8 months, and then moved to Chicago to work in a division of the company that made aluminum beverage cans. He started in the engineering group, worked for a few years, and then moved into engineering operations after a 4-month project to improve efficiency at the plant in New Jersey. He then moved to a plant in Ohio as the engineering manager, performing a lean transformation with the new plant manager. They did that for 2.5 years and making pretty significant operational improvements. Mike then was recruited to the BYU Manufacturing Engineering program by Dr. Nelson and Dr. Erickson. He has been at BYU since 2001 and currently teaches the Intro to Manufacturing class, Metals Processing, and the graduate level Lean class. He has also been doing lean consulting while he's been at BYU for a variety of different companies, mainly those involved in the automotive industry. Did I miss anything, Mike?
No, that was good. So I spent about 7 years in industry total before coming to BYU, and have been here since 2001. It's been over 20 years, which is amazing.
Wow, that's incredible. That also dates me because I think your very first semester at BYU, I was one of your students.
Yeah, you came along. It doesn't seem that long ago, but I guess it was. And you graduated with your master's in
05.
Yeah. So time really flies.
It really does. It's kind of crazy how that works. But I had to, of course, get my BYU pride out there.
Yeah.
So I've always been a fan of the old school logo, so had to represent that. And then, of course, the coveted bomber jacket.
Oh, yeah.
When I was at school, everybody wanted this jacket, and you could only get that jacket if you were a TA. So, yeah.
I forgot about that. The TA swag.
Yes, exactly. Everybody
still
fought
have that
over
from
it.
time to time.
It was a lot of fun. It's been really good. Dr. Miles and I, or Mike and I, it's still weird for me. I've been in contact since graduation though, because I'm a member of the Industrial Advisory Board. So I luckily get to go back to campus twice a year to talk about the program. So it's been really good.
It has been good. It's been great having you involved on the board. And it's been great to kind of follow your career too.
Yeah, it's been all over the place. It's changed a lot. I've been in a lot of industries, so it's been a lot of fun. And I appreciate it because I've asked you for a lot of advice over the years as well.
Well, I don't know if my advice has helped that much, but it's been great to kind of see you evolve through different companies and be successful. And it's great to talk to you today.
Thanks. Well, let's jump right on into it then.
Okay.
So when I say teaching lean, what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, I think it's a little bit different in industry than it is at university.
Yeah, for sure.
In industry, I think the nice thing about teaching lean is that typically you do it in a workshop type format, and people are able to go out and apply it to their jobs right away.
Yeah.
So they've got a context for
Yeah.
things that you're teaching. That's really powerful. At university, we have one class that's an undergraduate class where it's more of an in-class type instruction. So I think students are able to learn lean principles,
Yeah.
but I don't think they really understand until they either have a chance to do an internship and apply lean, or I teach class a little bit later on. Some seniors take it. It's a graduate class where they go to a local company and do a lean project. And I think the project aspect of it is really helpful. So when you teach lean, I think a lot of subjects are this way, but particularly with lean, I don't think you get much confidence until you can try it against a real system.
Yeah, I would agree. I loved my undergraduate lean class, but it was heavy, I would say more heavily quality type based. So I was learning a lot of the quality kind of methodologies, and those are also easier to test on too, because it's math and charts and different things. So it's easier to test on. But once I got into your graduate level class and was working in industry, it made a huge difference to my understanding for sure.
Yeah, and I think, it's not that the principles are so difficult, but it's kind of hard to understand how they work unless you can apply them to a system. And so that's why I think the project is good. And that class is kind of limited in size because of that, but I maintained it that way. And so I don't know, it's a little bit of a compromise. Undergraduate, we do the best we can. And I think it's a good class. We have quality. We also have a full lean class now as an
exciting
junior type level class. But it's tough to really get the hang of it and gain confidence until you can do a project or work with somebody in a real factory type setting.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was the main place where it kind of solidified for me. Because like you were saying, in more of an industry type setting, it's more of like a lab, if you will. And it's more involved because you have actual applications, things that are applicable to the actual team for why we're doing it. We used to call it boot camp because it was that intense of a session. It was 2 weeks long. It was an intense boot camp, and the second week was a virtual factory, essentially, where we had to apply all of the tools that we learned from the previous week into a fictitious factory, which kind of mirrored where we were working. But it was really interesting because we actually got to implement the tools that we had learned from the previous week and see it in action, how it really changes stuff, which can be a challenge in a university setting. So what are some of the types of things that you do in a university setting versus an industry setting?
Well, I think you can have case studies. So you can go through real situations and, still in the classroom. I think we could probably do some sort of simulations, maybe a little bit more than what we do. Apart from, going ahead and doing the project like you did in the class that was a little bit later on, it is difficult, but I think case studies, simulations, things that sort of physically illustrate how principles work, how a pull system works, how single piece flow works, that helps students get it a little bit better, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and you've done both. You've been part of industrial, industry type settings where you've done major transitions, as well as teaching the university side. Would you say that that's the most challenging part, is showing them the applicable side of it in a university setting?
Yeah, I think so. Because like you say, in industry, they've got the context, they've got their job, they can easily apply the principles to their current situation. The students are still kind of grasping for what does this actually mean. So I don't know. We do our best with the case studies. I think we could probably do more physical games and simulations to give people an idea of how things actually work. But even then, they're not going to fully understand it and really become grounded in it until they apply it in a real situation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and some organizations do it differently too. They may call a tool something totally different. I know at Tesla, we called it motion. So everything is about speed at Tesla. So our continuous improvement effort, it wasn't called continuous improvement. It was actually called service motion. So it's all about speed and agility kind of thing. At the aerospace company, it was just our production system way. And then of course, people hear about the Toyota production system. It's just the different aspects as taken by the culture of the organization, I would assume.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and people typically adopt, I mean, if they're going to start a transformation, you get somebody at the top that's sort of leading it. They'll name it their own system, but really essentially they're using principles of Toyota production system.
Yeah, exactly. So do you think there's a difference between teaching in a lean way and just normal teaching, or are they roughly the same?
You mean, when you mean teaching in a lean way, you mean applying lean principles to teaching?
Yeah.
You know, I think I could do a better job on trying to look for ways to apply lean principles to teaching. But I think overall, I do try to eliminate waste. I try to have things, you know, sort of essential and not a lot of extra sort of busy work. In terms of just in time, sometimes it's me just in time learning something before I teach it to the class.
I've been there.
Usually, hopefully not, but I think, you know, the idea of always working to improve the content. So I do try to sort of review and improve every year so that I'm not static. I mean, those are a few of the things, I guess, that would apply to lean principles as far as teaching.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, some folks think that the Toyota production system has been the same, at least the philosophy has been the same since the beginning, if you will, but it's changed a lot. And teaching an actual lean course should improve as well. Yeah. It shouldn't stay stagnant, but it's got to be hard to stay on top of all of those things. Like what's changed in industry and how it's applied, that's got to be crazy.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you go out and do some consulting from time to time, it helps to kind of see what people are doing, what the current issues are. I mean, a lot of the principles that you use are always going to be similar, but the way they're applied might change a little bit. And in terms of teaching, I'm always looking for examples to help illustrate principles. So new examples that, and you find a lot of things online that are nice, although some of the best examples come from my own consulting projects.
Interesting. Yeah. So you've had a lot of great experience, of course, in the past, as well as your lean consulting. So how often do your clients, if you will, allow you to bring their information into class? Do they offer it?
Yeah, usually it's not a problem. I just have to make sure and ask, but I don't reveal anything that's confidential.
Yeah, no financials or anything.
Yeah, no financials or anything, but I can show, for example, the transformation of a work area into a cell or something like that.
Oh, right, yeah.
And show kind of how the work was divided and what the new throughput times are and how things would work if it was 2 or 3 or 4 people in the cell, that sort of thing.
That's cool. What would you say is one of your most successful projects outside of the university that involved lean?
I won't say the companies. One of them was more automotive related, and the other one was more medical device related. But in both cases, it was really just taking, a product from being produced in batch fashion. So, doing Operation A, doing 50 or 100, putting them in racks, right?
Yeah.
And then next doing Operation B, pulling them off the racks, doing Operation B and so forth, kind of the classical batch type processing,
Yeah.
and just going to single piece flow. And in both cases, there were 2 medical products that we were able to do that with. And then there was a family of automotive parts. In both cases, it wasn't very difficult to do it. It wasn't difficult to set up the cell.
Yeah.
It was kind of challenging to convince people to try it.
Yeah.
I was there specifically to do that sort of thing, so we were able to try it. And the thing that's kind of rewarding is to watch the people that were skeptical have their minds kind of blown during the first 3 or 4 hours of trying the new cell, where they're making parts and putting them in finished goods, packing them ready to ship in the first few hours rather than, on the 3rd or 4th day of batch type processing. So
That's awesome.
it is fun to watch that aha moment happen in real time.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my goodness. I remember, I've mentioned this a few times in some of my other videos, but I remember talking to this one gentleman. He wanted to make an island. He did not want anybody else to come into his island. And by the end of that week, he was painting the floor. And it was like mind-blowing to me that he was able to do that. It was incredible. It's super fun. I think that's one of the main reasons why I like Lean so much, is seeing that aha moment. It's kind of, I would assume, similar to the same happy moment when you see a student actually get a difficult concept.
It is. And I think, in my case, most of the time that happens in the project-oriented class.
Yes.
Where you're sort of teaching the concepts, then they go into a local company, they do all their analysis, they do their value stream mapping, and they decide what they might want to change. And usually the companies are very cooperative and they can try things. And that's when they start having those aha moments. But yeah, it is definitely fun to see that. And it's really fun to see it when you're working with employees on the shop floor that have been doing something in a certain way for a long time, and they're convinced that it's a bad idea to try it in a different way, to see them totally flip and embrace the new way within a couple of hours. That's a lot of fun.
It's super fun. Well, and it's interesting too, because we talk a lot about lean culture. And if the culture is not right, I could teach all the lean tools you could ever want. But if the culture is not right, it's never going to stick. Have you seen that in your experience too?
Yeah. And typically when that happens, there isn't really a strong support from the leadership in the company.
Oh, most definitely.
And we've done projects locally where we go in and work with middle management, and we're able to come in and do a project. And if it's a company that has a lean culture already, it's a different experience than if they don't really have one, or if they don't really understand what lean is all about. It's not a true sort of transformational project or a sustained effort to transform the company using lean principles. So I think the leadership part is really critical to making it work and having it be successful over the long run. Otherwise, these kind of half-baked implementations maybe do even more harm than good.
Oh my goodness, it's so true. I can't even tell you how many people in my consulting or even in past lives at different companies going into suppliers and whatnot, where I've seen, I don't know what to call it other than the graveyard of lean stuff.
Yeah.
where they've tried to implement maybe a 5S program or something. Some of those are the hardest companies to convince later on that lean actually works, because they've seen it fail. And so they have a real hard time saying, yeah, this 5S stuff, yeah, sure, I'm sure it's really going to help me. They have a harder time grasping it. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, Yeah, I've seen it. And I even saw it a little bit in my own company because there were a lot of plants. There were maybe 18 or 20 plants.
That's a lot.
And so there was, even though at the top of the company, definitely there was a push and a lot of support to
Yeah.
implement lean. It kind of varied a little bit plant to plant. And eventually all of the plants got on board, but some were faster than others. And some went through the difficulty of maybe trying to go a little too quickly and then turning into a lean graveyard for a few months. And
Yeah.
that is demotivating for employees when they see, a big push motivation, then a drop in effort, not sustaining the activities, not updating the boards.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to try to avoid that. You want to have a sustained effort, something you can,
Yeah.
but that you don't take a step backward in your commitment to it, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. I had a team. I was using a simple to-do list or issue, problem, and opportunity sheet that I've used for however long I've been out of school. I've used this tool, and it's just a basic lean tool. I call it a to-do list, where it identifies what the real problem is, kind of goes through a shorter version of 5 whys, and then gets to a countermeasure, and then who it's assigned to and how far the progress is. It was really interesting because I had someone tell me, well, I need rules and regulations surrounding this to-do list. And I looked at the individual and I said, why? Why do you need rules and regulations surrounding this? And their response was, well, I'm concerned that this is going to be used as a weapon. And I said, okay. So the real problem is you're concerned that people are going to be called out on this document as doing their job incorrectly. And the individual said, yes, I'm really concerned about that. And it was difficult to try to explain to them, I've never seen that happen on this document, not once. And it was really hard for them to understand that concept, that it's never happened, because it's like, well, of course it will happen. I'd imagine, somebody's angry, they're going to write it up there. But that's not really like how a lean environment kind of works.
Right.
And so it was interesting because it uncovered some of the behavioral things in the culture that maybe need to be addressed before releasing a tool like that, to try to help them understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, somewhere there's a little bit of lack of trust, maybe between some of the management and the employees, but you're right, in a lean environment that, there shouldn't be any lack of trust. It should be a cooperative relationship. And I think I pretty much have experienced the cooperative side of the relationship, even in situations where initially it might be kind of hard to get going. After a little while, sustaining the effort, you see that that trust being built, and cooperation is really productive at that point. So you do have to work through things like that sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and having gone through this a few times, kickstarting lean transitions and stuff in your career before going into the university, do you see things differently? Like, do you see things through a lean lens now?
Yeah, I mean, I got training when I was in industry. The book that I typically use for teaching is The Toyota Way. There was a first edition, now there's a second edition. It's a really good book to teach those principles. You definitely see the challenges when you're doing the implementation yourself. Students don't sort of get that when you're talking about lean, teaching the principles, and it seems like, okay, that seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And then they go into their project and they realize it's not so straightforward, because not everybody wants to cooperate with them. Exactly. And they have to sort of gain their trust and figure out how to work together. I think that's just as valuable almost as learning the principles.
Totally.
Because if you're not able to work with people and gain their trust and implement something together, you're just not going to go very far.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, and I think that's part of the reason why we had so many team projects too, right? If we had to learn how to function as a team,
Yeah.
I would think that's one of the main purposes of the capstone program.
Oh, yeah, definitely. In Capstone at BYU, learning to function as a team, and especially a team with people who are different from you,
Yeah.
like different majors. They all kind of have their own orientation, way of looking at things. And so manufacturing engineers and mechanical engineers working together with electrical engineers it is a little bit of a simulation for what they're actually going to see when they go into industry.
Totally. My my capstone program, or my project, I should say, was a very complex little unit. And I can't go into details, obviously, signed an NDA as a student. But it was a really complicated little thing that needed to function really well. And it was my first experience outside of, one of my physics classes or my calculus classes, where I was mixed with all the other engineering disciplines. And it was fascinating how we all worked together and the assumptions we made about each other as well. So when I came in, being a manufacturing engineer, they were like, oh, okay, so you're going to be the one that's building this thing in the lab. And I'm like, what? Aren't we building it together? So it was a good experience to be like, wait a minute, we all have skill sets. We shouldn't make assumptions about each other. It was a really interesting program. I'm glad it happened.
Yeah, and I think that happens over and over again, and people work through that. And even though you might have more strength in that area, doesn't mean that you're going to be the only one who works on it. Others need to sort of take the opportunity to learn, as well as you maybe taking the opportunity to learn about something that's a little bit more on the mechanical design side or whatever, the electrical side. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and for those watchers that are interested or trying to decide between programs, because we may have some prospective students that are watching, I will say the manufacturing engineering program at BYU is one of the top in the nation, if not the top in the nation, for applications and lab opportunities. I learned so much from the hands-on aspect of all of our classes. All of them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we do try to do is have for almost every class have some kind of a lab where you can go in and try things. And I think that is one of the strengths of our program. We're trying to be more analytical in recent years with more data analysis and statistics. And we're doing more in the automation area and smart manufacturing, where programming and algorithms come into it. But we have not changed our basic philosophy of it's important to learn principles in the classroom, but it's also important to then go try things in the lab.
Yeah. Well, and in all of those classes, especially the ones that you teach, do you find the opportunity to bring in, besides the lean class, of course, to bring in some lean aspects to it? So like when you're talking about metallics processing, do you bring in some lean concepts as well in those courses?
Yeah, because in the sense that when you're talking about design for manufacturing and assembly, you're definitely trying to add value as much as you can and eliminate waste.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the main areas where lean principles come in. I think almost all of our process classes have an opportunity for the design for manufacturing and assembly principles and examples of how those apply. So, in the intro class, it's kind of a survey, but when I teach that class, I always tend to bias it a little bit because I like lean content. So I sort of add in more than maybe I should, but weight it a little bit more heavily. So yeah, I do look for those opportunities. because I think it's valuable, and I think
Uh-huh.
there's so many companies that need the expertise. There's
Oh my goodness, yes.
most companies have been exposed to it,
Mhm.
but I tell students, in most cases, even for a company that's doing well, there's going to be many opportunities for you to make contribution with your lean
Yeah.
knowledge and orientation.
Oh, it's so true. Most of the companies that I've interviewed with or eventually got a position with, they all heavily valued my knowledge from Lean, and that includes the very first job I got out of BYU. They were most impressed with how my thought processes were, that it was very process oriented and looking for waste and opportunities to improve it. They hadn't seen that before. My husband always talks about some of the engineers that have come out of more like really strong technical schools, specifically in the UK. He was referring to them. He said that one of the engineers that came in, was hired right out of college, came in, he asked him, okay, I need you to design this bracket for me. And so the student sat down and opened a spreadsheet. And he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, well, there's a lot of math that's associated with it, so I need to do that first. And he's like, time out. Have you ever designed a product before? And the student was like, no. I've never really opened a CAD system before. And he's like, oh my gosh. So he had to start from scratch with that particular student. It's not true of all of them, but
Yeah.
for this one, it was a very interesting experience for him, because he's like, my gosh, I was practically, an industrial designer by the time I was done with my program.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where it was like, there's got to be a balance, like a balance between the theory aspect and the application aspect. And I think BYU does that very well.
I think so too. And I mean, mechanical engineering traditionally is pretty heavily design oriented, but this particular program I've discovered, because design wasn't really my specific area. I've had to use it when I was in industry. I was evaluating designs using modeling techniques and so forth, but I wasn't really the designer. And what I've noticed here is that our manufacturing engineering group, they love to design things. And I think they just see it as the first step into, I've got to design it first and then I'm going to make it.
Yeah.
And so I've seen some really, really strong designers come out of manufacturing engineering.
Agreed.
But I think just about all of them sort of have the ability to design things, and we sort of require that in our classes. Most classes have a project where you have to design and make something.
Yeah, which is amazing. It's so brilliant. Well, and I really did learn how to think process wise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think without the lean principles being taught in all of my classes, I think I would have had a harder time connecting the dots. But because, lean teaches process mapping and value stream mapping and standard work and all of those good tools, it really made me start to think differently about how things are made.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, why does that step need to come first? And does it make sense that that step comes first? And is that step even required? It started to make me really think differently about what was value added versus non-value added as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was really well, and I found that it's kind of bled into my personal life as well. Have you seen that also, like at home? Has any of these concepts come into your home?
Yeah, I mean, I do think about things like inventory and content a little bit, and 5S for sure in the garage. I did do that to my closet at one point. I was like, I really should try to do some 5S in my closet, and I found the typical thing. Hey, I didn't know I had that. I wish I hadn't bought the same thing.
Yes.
I already had one.
Exactly.
you know, you kind of relearn the principles on your own sometimes, but you can't take it too far with your family.
True, true.
In your own areas, it's okay.
Right. Yeah, Adrian and I have learned because I'm very like, if things don't make sense where they're put in the house, like I get frustrated. And so he's learned, okay, you can handle the organization of stuff, like the initial placement of things, but my drawers are mine.
Exactly. Everybody's got to have their own space.
Exactly. So has your family noticed some of this kind of creeping in?
I think it's been noticed once in a while. Yeah, I try not to be too overbearing, and you know, as you can see, I've got some work in process inventory behind me here. I mean, I always have to try to work at implementing it in my own areas. It's easier for me to almost to go into a factory and work with it in a space where people are making a product or working with a process. But it is, I think, a good idea to try to look at your own situation and try to apply those principles. It's fun to do that.
Yeah, it is. Well, and Marie Kondo did a great job commercializing 5S.
That's true.
Like, I'm kind of bummed I didn't get on that train first.
Yeah, I've read a little bit. Her stuff is pretty good. But I think 5S is one of those things that, like, if you're starting off with a group in a factory, that's one of the things that's pretty easy to get people behind.
Yeah.
And to have some fun with it, as they, you know, people love to sort through and clean things out.
Oh yeah.
And then they love to sort of look at the situation, see how they can organize it better. And if you're providing the resources for that to get done, you can really make a lot of progress fairly quickly.
Yeah.
With that.
It's so true. Well, and having done this industry wide, because for your organization, how many sites did you say? 18?
So yeah, I mean, I was only involved in 2 of them, but yeah, we had like 18 sites. I don't know if there's that many now because there was a little bit of consolidation, but it was a pretty big effort. And so there was training. The training had to be rolled out over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a huge commitment to training people, and the boot camps that we had typically lasted a week, but then you would go back in to the factory with assignments and follow-ups, and
oh, cool.
It was a fun process.
That's really cool, because then they can apply it to their direct area.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
That's the motivating thing about doing it in industry, and maybe the challenge of doing it at university, although we do our best to try to provide examples and obviously have some projects where possible.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you know, companies do it differently. I've had one company where they had no training. It was all on the job training, which was very heavy, I guess, focused on who's your lean leader for the area, which can be both good and bad. Because then some things could be done differently based off of site, just because of the preference of that particular leader, which can sometimes be dangerous. Another one, like I mentioned before, where they had the 2-week boot camp, which was heavy intense, but it wasn't applied on the floor directly, I should say. But how the process of it was done was all the same across all of the sites that were internal. So like a Kaizen event scope sheet was filled out the same way. How the event occurred was done the same way. We even had tack time lights at event report outs that told us if we were going over our 15 minutes or not.
Oh, nice.
I was very controlled in that situation. I learned a ton. From it, but there's lots of different ways to accomplish the same goal is what I'm getting at. Would you say that there's no one right way of training lean or coaching lean, or do you think there is a right way of doing it?
I don't think there's, you know, necessarily just a right way, but I think you do have to sort of mingle the PowerPoint slides and the sort of lecture part of it with hands-on activities.
Yeah, yeah,
And get a grasp. Some of the people that you're teaching have never even heard of it before.
yeah, that's
Concepts
true.
are not very intuitive. So having, some discussion of the principles and then, a game or an exercise to illustrate it, I think is the best. And then when they have the opportunity, they're in industry, to go back the very next week and start applying those principles with hopefully some kind of a lean leader, somebody they're working with that has the training.
Yeah,
I think, you really are very effective at, getting that person, giving them every opportunity
yeah,
to learn it, apply it, and really gain confidence in it.
totally. Would you say that, what state does the culture need to be in order to implement a continuous improvement or lean journey?
Well, I think that, the leadership thing is first.
Mhm.
There really has to be a commitment from top leadership, going down through to why you need to do it and
Mhm.
what the benefits could be. And it's all about being competitive, I think, over time, right?
Yeah,
Industry is very competitive. And so you want to have the ability to create a lean, flexible system that can respond to customer demand. And you don't want to build more capacity than you really need.
yeah, exactly.
So, if top management understands that and they can articulate the vision, and then they come through with the training, give people an opportunity to learn and implement, and they're guided, and it's a supportive atmosphere and not like a crack the whip type atmosphere. I think
Yeah.
those elements really contribute to a successful culture of, hey, we're working together. I'm not on it, by myself trying to do these improvements. I've
Mhm.
got people I can go to, and I'm going to be part of the solution of making our company successful and competitive so that we all have good opportunities into the future.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've both been in situations where the culture was more of the crack the whip kind of situation, and it didn't do very well. We may have seen that in our consulting. We may have seen it from places that we've worked. But the crack the whip doesn't work. It just
No, it
doesn't.
really doesn't. I mean, maybe over the short term, but over the long term, that type of culture will not beat a culture where you've got collaboration and support
Yeah.
and everybody pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, and everybody pulling in the same direction is an interesting concept too. Like I was just mentioning, the different ways that lean is rolled out. Me personally, I like to have the same language, I guess, being spoken at each of the sites during a rollout, versus having one person that's the guru person at each site, because they could eventually go in opposite directions.
Yeah, that's true. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. For me, I've seen where it's gone sideways, where it's like, well, this person says I should be doing it this way. Well, this other person says that I should be doing it this way. Which way is right? I've been caught in the middle of those kinds of things before, and it can get pretty nasty sometimes.
Yeah, and sometimes the differences are just semantics, but
Yeah,
one of the
exactly.
things that we experienced in our in the company that I was at before I came to BYU, one of the things that I thought really worked well was we would have regional meetings pretty regularly every couple months. And so maybe there's 5 or 6 plants in a region. The
Yeah.
management from the plants would all go to one of the plants and have a meeting.
Oh, cool.
By kind of going to different plants, you had an opportunity to see their take on, how to do quick changeovers or total
Yeah.
productive maintenance or visual factory. And even though we were all trying to speak the same language, it was so cool to go to a factory who maybe wasn't the best performing factory in the region,
Yeah.
But they had some things going on there that were better than everybody else in some
Yeah.
aspects of lean. And so that was a ton of fun to sort of see the different implementations and learn from that and bring it back to your own and benefit from it.
Yeah. One of my clients calls that stealing shamelessly
Yeah,
from each other.
exactly.
Those
Well,
are good
and
things
that's what we
to
were
steal.
trying to do, was we were trying to share and steal shamelessly from each other. And I think the culture was great in that sense. It wasn't competitive. It was very
Yeah.
collaborative, fun.
Yeah, which is an interesting concept in and of itself, because, competitiveness, especially inside a university, especially for people who want to get a PhD or want to progress in their education and then become a professor someday, it's really competitive. University environment is really competitive in terms of GPA and that kind of stuff. So some of the more collaborative type skill sets, some people may struggle with in a university setting. Is the idea to get them to understand or work more collaboratively in these kinds of like team projects and stuff like that, get them more exposure to that?
I mean, when you're talking about university, you're right. It is, there's kind of more of an individual performance orientation, but I do like, that's why I do like team projects. And we try to have people evaluate each other as well.
That's good.
Not to make it something where, it's an opportunity to hammer somebody else, but just to know that we're going to evaluate each other. And so we really should try to make the most of this team project and work together. And if we do that, we're going to have the best outcome for everybody.
Yeah, that's very unique, because I don't remember doing that when I was in school. So that must be something that's newer.
Yeah, I've been doing it, so especially in the intro class where we have team projects, I've been doing that for quite a while.
That's cool.
And I don't know, it seems to work. In some of the other classes, junior level classes, they're individual projects. So it doesn't apply. And then in the lean class, sort of depends. Some people are doing an individual project. Others are working together, usually not in groups of greater than 3. It's usually 1 to 2. And in that one, I typically, it's a graduate class or a senior class. At that point, I sort of figure people can work together, and they don't need sort of the, hey, you're going to evaluate each other. But I think early on, it's not a bad idea to sort of introduce the idea that, hey, you need to work together. And, when you're a freshman or, you're a sophomore, you need to be reminded a little bit more than when you're a junior or senior or maybe a graduate student.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, and it's good too, because it's getting them to start thinking about their leadership style as well. Because when they go into industry, they're going to be evaluated on performance. Like, that doesn't end with GPA. That continues.
And individual performance, but I think you're also in industry, you're evaluated pretty heavily on how you collaborate with others.
Yes, very much so.
So
yeah, well, and in some organizations, if you don't play well with others, it's hard for you to be promoted, and especially in a lean role. So if you wanted to get a lean role in industry, you have to play well and play nice with others. Because if you don't, you're not going to get buy-in from anybody.
Kind of counter to the lean culture, right? So
yeah,
I can see that. And for sure in lean, but I think in just about everything, when you've got somebody that's not collaborative and not easy to work with, it's not a route to career success.
Yeah, agreed. Well, and it's good because it's starting early.
Yeah. We try.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than getting a brand new graduate who thinks they know everything and don't have the ability to do some self-reflection and realize these folks have like a lot more years experience than I do. I should probably listen to them for a while.
Yeah, and I don't know, over the years, you see students who you feel like sort of need that help.
Yes.
You're trying your best, but you realize they're not going to learn that until they go into industry and they
True.
suffer a few hard knocks. And then it is amazing to see people like that a few years down the line, and they have changed and they've benefited from the, I don't know, maybe some of the struggles they've gone through to understand that being collaborative is the best way to success.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Do you think that all leaders should be lean teachers or senseis, or should they have other people do it?
So I mean, I think that they should all be understand and really have lived some aspect of lean. And if they hadn't had the opportunity, if they already get into a leadership position, they should still look for a chance to do some kind of implementation and really be involved in it at a practical level, because otherwise I'm not sure you can really understand the true value of it. And so, you know, within Toyota, obviously, all the leaders have had long experience with the principles, and they're able to be teachers. In other companies, it may not be as practical, but it should be something that people strive for. And I think leaders can find ways to go through their own training and apply the principles in their own situations. And to me, that would be the best approach.
Yeah, it makes sense, because it's one of those things where practical knowledge is really important, and the ability to communicate the philosophy behind it is really important.
Yeah.
And I know for me, I remember learning in I think it was the graduate level lean class, you were talking about conveyors.
Mm-hmm.
And the use of conveyors. And it didn't hit me until I saw a factory loaded with conveyors and how counter to lean that actually is.
Yeah.
I would not have been able to officially say, no, I've seen this. We need to rip out some of these conveyors because they don't make sense. Without actually seeing it.
True. You know, because I mean, if you try to provide an example in the classroom, you know, people, what's wrong with a conveyor? But you know,
Right.
Conveyors aren't very flexible sometimes, and they just represent motion and wasted time sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not that every conveyor should be ripped out, but you should
Right.
ask the question, why is this needed?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, in that one
Designing something
conveyor.
from scratch, anyway.
Yeah. Well, in that one conveyor, I walked into the organization and I was like, how long is this conveyor? So it turned out that one box, one product would sit on that conveyor and travel over 5 miles.
Oh, wow.
In the organization. So I was like, this really isn't helping the way that you're wanting it to help, because that stuff is stuck on a conveyor somewhere. And of course it was up high. So it was above all the racks and stuff. Mm-hmm. So that you couldn't even really walk up to the conveyor and take the product off of it if you needed it. You had to wait until it arrived to the next station. It was interesting, but I wouldn't have known that, you know, without speaking to a lean leader who had seen it before.
Yeah. And, you know, in manufacturing operations, you really try to not have a lot of conveying. In distribution, it's a little different, you know.
True.
You know, fulfillment center, something like that. But even then, you know, you really want to have the design of your conveyors, the flexibility, the speeds and everything. Yeah. There's so much technology that goes into those systems. But if you're really talking about a place where you're producing things and not distributing things, I always ask the question, what, you know, can we arrange this system in a way where we don't necessarily need to travel so far, or a conveyor that's not very flexible? Always ask the question, right?
Yeah. I used to always ask my Tesla team, what problem are you trying to solve? Because they would immediately come to me with solutions, which was awesome. but was it the right solution? So I would always ask them, what problem are you trying to solve? Slow down. You're running 100 miles an hour in that direction. How are you sure that is even the right countermeasure to what you're talking about? Exactly. So I'd have to stop them and say, stop. What problem are you trying to solve? And that wouldn't have happened without, some lean experience behind me saying, I've been that person that's been like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this and it's going to solve all these problems. Well, is it really the root cause, or is that just me creating another Band-Aid to cover the real problem?
Yeah. And when there's urgency, we tend to jump to those conclusions and try to get to a solution quickly, and it almost never works, right?
Yeah, exactly. It almost never works.
Doesn't.
Well, do you have any advice for leadership maybe trying to promote change in their organizations and they may be struggling with buy-in?
I think the main thing is to try to understand where you'd like to go. Mm-hmm. And then lean principles are almost always going to help you get there. But if you need help, you may not be able to do it all internally. You may have to have some outside help come in. I think the thing internally that you can do is be very consistent in your message and in your effort in sustaining the initiative to move forward and make changes and improve, continuously provide training and support. And if that's a consistent effort and your message isn't changing all the time, I think that's a lot of the battle right there.
Yeah, my goodness. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's where people start to lose faith in the process. Because if your message is constantly changing, they don't know what they're following from week to week.
Right. And if you've got a meeting and you miss the meeting because there's something urgent that came up, you really need to show where your priorities are in maintaining that level of energy and focus. That this is important, and this is how we're gonna work, and we're gonna support it all the way through. This is how we do business.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's true. What about teaching versus coaching? Are they the same thing for you, or are they different?
I think they're a little different. I think the teaching comes first and then the coaching comes afterward, at least in the way that I do it. In my graduate class, we obviously do some teaching. We try to introduce things, maybe do a few case studies, and then we go in and start trying to do analysis in a real system and decide, what could we do to improve this system using lean principles. And that's where the coaching really comes in, going kind of on site and allowing people to sort of develop their own solutions or their own proposals for solutions, and then just sort of consulting with them on that and doing some coaching.
Yeah, that's a really good thought, that coaching is more like a consultation, like a leading training, if you will, like leading the witness. For lack of a better term, but it's kind of like bringing the horse to water.
Yeah.
And telling them this is good.
Exactly. But over the years,
have you ever had sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, over the years, I'm always surprised when I go in to consult with students on their projects, because I let them sort of get started for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, then I go in and take a look. I'm always usually pleasantly surprised at how much they've sort of figured things out on their own. And I do some coaching with them, but the fact that they've had a chance to sort of look at a manufacturing system, do the value stream map, do a lot of observation, right? Kind of see how things function, absorb that, and then start to think about what would it look like if we could improve this system with some lean principles. They always kind of surprise me to the upside. So that's fun.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah, that's that learning how to think. That I think I learned so much from yourself and a few of my other professors there. My dad used to tell me, you're going to college, yes, for a degree and all that good stuff, but really you're going to learn how to think and how to think differently.
Yeah, for
I've
sure.
always thought about that in how I coach as well. Like, I'm not there to give them the answer. I'm there to help them think about it differently and then provide an answer if they don't get there. That makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of help fill in the blanks a little bit. And we all need it from time to time.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But
Heaven knows I'm not perfect. And there are lots of things I can improve
relearning
on for
things
sure.
once in a while as well. But yeah, it's good to have a coach, and it's good to do some coaching, kind of be on both sides of it.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, is there anyone in your life that helped, shape your leadership style, or were they a lean sensei? Were they just somebody that you really respected?
I think, early on at the company where we were sort of doing the transformation, there were people that I worked with. The plant manager that I worked with definitely taught me a lot about leadership style, accountability, but also, sort of understanding people and,
Yeah.
listening to people, making sure that, especially on the shop floor, that people had significant input. You could sort of help do the coaching, but you wanted them to really learn and develop their own solutions. Those are things that I think helped me a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had the same. It's probably a handful of people that
Yeah,
have really shaped me as a person. But
right.
is there anything that we missed that you would like to share?
No, it's just been great talking to you. It's been awesome to follow your career and see the amazing things that you've done, and I'm just really excited to see what's next for you. And it's fun to follow all the students. People are graduating now, going out and getting great jobs, and
Yeah.
it's just amazing to follow people on LinkedIn and see what everybody's working on. People have been so successful. I'm always, if I'm not having a great day, I just go onto LinkedIn and see how well people are doing. Feel better.
Same. Well, and you've been one of those people for me as well. From class, classes together, and then as our friendship has increased as years have gone on, I've always looked to you as somebody that I could consult with and make good decisions. So I really appreciate that in my life as well.
Well, thank you. And I don't feel like I've done very much, but I sure have enjoyed watching you. And it's been great to have that association over the years.
Likewise, it's been awesome. Well, and I hope to, have you come back sometime and talk to us again. It would be great.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, you have a great rest of your day, and I'm sure we'll be in contact soon. There's another IAB coming up soon, I'm sure.
6 months. Thanks, Michelle. Great.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Bye.